Hello, and welcome to End-to-End's presentation of Always Be Learning. My name is John Breifogel, and my life motto, as it happens, is Always Be Learning. In General Stanley McChrystal's book, Team of Teams, which we'll talk more about later, General McChrystal begins by chronicling how U.S. and Allied forces were facing a very unfamiliar enemy in Iraq with AQI or Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and that despite overwhelming advantages across the board, in sheer numbers of very well-trained and deeply specialized troops and intelligence staff, we were essentially losing to a ragtag group who, it turns out, communicated in very small cells at very high rates of precision. McChrystal's command group had to admit, due to increasing casualties, that as a leadership group, they needed to commit to new learning and do so quickly and on the fly. Learning was critical to victory and minimizing casualties, and McChrystal was viewed with quite mixed feelings for admitting our shortcomings despite overwhelming superiority in training, firepower, intelligence, and command. There are countless marketing and sales organizations out there unwilling to recognize or admit to losing more than they should. But of course, they don't happen to have death, stark as it is, as a scorecard for their effectiveness. So, too often, marketing and sales leaders accept it's always been done as core to their strategy. A few failures are just part of expected casualty. Well, there's ample inspiration from the many examples of extraordinary learning leadership across the domains of business, sports, medicine, and more. What makes Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and so many others like them excel, where others like you and me are still trying to figure it all out? Well, for one, they never feel as though they don't have anything new to learn. Each are voracious readers, and they surround themselves with smart people who challenge their thinking. It's likewise with lesser-known leaders, like Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, who led two of Google's major acquisitions. She was planning to pursue a PhD in economics after Harvard when Infotech caught her eye, and she's so highly regarded because of her passionate commitment to learning and getting input from all sides. And then maybe being a mother of 5 kids helps. Elon Musk is obviously no longer among the lesser known, having broken out from his PayPal startup days to form Tesla and then SpaceX, but he too is known for wanting to learn, find, and be fed new information and knowledge continuously. He and most of these business leaders see their ability to learn and act on that learning as a key advantage. Ted Williams, Tony Gwynn, Joey Votto, and similar great hitters in baseball study other great hitters past and present, but they also intently study opposing pitchers. They tune into any teammates or competitors' take on a given pitcher, digging for any possible edge. Great quarterbacks, from Joe Montana to Peyton Manning to Tom Brady, all became devoted students in every pertinent subject relative to their job, from arm strength conditioning and diet to reading defenses to creating perfect timing with their receivers. And then studying the next opponent's game film for patterns and tendencies became their real passion. I just watched Ford versus Ferrari, and while not considering myself a big race fan, I have at least been to one Indy 500 and one Brickyard 500. I was interested to explore more about great drivers and their crew chiefs. Man, talk about learners. These guys are constantly pushing the envelope to learn anything that might give them a fraction of a second edge. Dale Inman was Richard Petty's chief, leading him to win 7 NASCAR championships across 187 race wins. And they're equally credited by true fans of the sport. Jimmy Johnson, with his crew chief, Chad Knaus, albeit in an era of greater parity, still equaled that number of championships across 81 wins, and Knaus is widely regarded for his ingenuity and his leadership. Learning is leadership. Just consider these visionaries who are hardly tied to just business or politics. Steve Jobs might have been a relatively unknown, tragic life story had he not been so committed to learning. After being pushed out of the company he co-founded, Jobs took to learning to the point of completely refashioning himself. Then he returned to Apple and refashioned it using key elements from what he learned while away to become one of the top 5 most successful companies of all time. One of his most important lessons learned while away came from his co-founding of Pixar, where concise, impactful storytelling was hammered home. You could say he leveraged that at Apple for sure. Martin Luther King Jr. was an obvious visionary, primarily by being a not-so-obvious extraordinary learner, whether it was adopting nonviolence or extending his message to support the working poor and underrepresented, and not just stick strictly to race issues. King listened and learned and adapted to expand his tent, as they say. There are 2 underlying lessons from these examples of learning from these extraordinary individuals. One is that they saw obstacles as learning opportunities that better equipped them. And secondly, that they were or are always looking forward to applying that learning. But while it's great to have all these wonderful examples of leadership, leaders who are committed lifelong learners, is being a dedicated lifelong learner, or is having a learning-oriented organization really all that important? Well, there's this. The landscape is littered with dead, know-it-all led companies. Companies that didn't think it was important to learn from their customers, their competitors, or their own employees. Blockbuster comes to mind, and there are lots of stories about them twice turning down Netflix, who wanted to be bought. And that's certainly an example of prideful ignorance, if in fact it went down that way. But it's really much simpler and sadder than that. They didn't listen to their customers. And it just so happened that a couple of guys who were flush from a recent sale of their respective .coms were paying attention, both to video and Blockbuster's customers. I mean, don't forget, streaming video was not where Netflix started, nor where they started beating Blockbuster. Netflix simply focused on Blockbuster's restrictive rental policies, which were, quite frankly, pissing customers off. And they created a process to mail DVDs to customers quite intentionally void of restrictive rental policies. Netflix learned to listen, and they listened to learn. Blockbuster did neither and faded into oblivion. Open your office doors and listen, and you're a leg up on the company that doesn't let any salespeople in the door, and doesn't invest in training, and doesn't listen to its employees' new ideas. Look, even Tiger Woods has a swing coach, and that coach isn't even a past touring pro. Tiger's on his 4th one, by the way. Always looking for ways to spot inconsistencies. You know, they say insanity is doing the same thing the same way and expecting different results. Yet, so many company leaders close themselves to new idea people coming with new ideas. You know, transformation only comes from learning, from acknowledging that you don't have all the answers, but that you do need at least the ones that drive your business operations. You're not an expert on everything. And great leaders are regarded as great more by how they connect people and ideas than how they come up with all the ideas themselves. So let's talk a little bit about sources of learning and ways to increase our learning. Looking up and out is the natural tendency for most of us, meaning we tend to focus our learning attention on bosses, mentors, parents, and known or near known authors and speakers. We look toward great business leaders from past and present, and there's still great sources for ideas and motivation. Many of those noted business leaders are also some of the leading authors. But if you also look for authors like Jim Collins of Good to Great fame and others who did breakthrough subject matter research versus a Lee Iacocca or Jack Welch who primarily told us about what they thought and did from what is now a bygone era, well, you'll most likely encounter some new ideas and thought leadership. Don't limit yourself to learning books and mentors and folks full of old wisdom. You need and should want new innovation leading ideas. So listen to all sorts of customer types. You want current and target customers in your existing market focus, but also talking to a few folks who are not target customers at all, but might offer the mind of a customer from a different perspective is a good opportunity to learn out of what you might expect. You want to learn as much as you can about who your best customers are and why. What makes them tick? What are they lacking that you might be in a unique position to provide? And so on. Competitors are a critical source for learning. The first thing consultants, SEO researchers, and so many others will do to learn about you and your business is to study and understand your competitors. Well, so should you. Competitors are either an example of what to do and or an example of what not to do. But chances are there are lessons to be learned if you know what to look for and how. Likewise, leading companies in industries and markets outside of your own represent great learning opportunities because they could be paving the way as disruptors in their industries for what you could be doing in yours. But the richest and sadly most untapped source of quality learning is right underneath you, literally. Flattening the organization is crucial as every perspective offers something of value, and your team is full of perspectives. In fact, in his wildly successful Measure What Matters book, legendary Silicon Valley venture capitalist John Doerr says to kill the annual review and go quarterly or more frequently with progress reports that replace reviews. Set up your lines of communication so you get input up and down your organization. Engaged staff makes your humans real resources. Separate from sources of learning, what we're trying to learn is learning about ourselves and our organizations. We need to get exposed to our blind spots. We need to understand that it's not our view of our organization that ultimately matters. Once there, we start to address from our SWOT our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's also important to add learning about topics outside of business to become more well-rounded and mature as a whole person. That matters as the learning leader for your organization. Learning about the market and potential audiences is similar to learning from them. At this point, though, don't look for confirmation, but rather look for where you might be wrong. You can't talk too much to your target audience, or better, listen too much from your target audience. Learning about the competition is not learning from them. It's more about studying them for their SWOT, their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and pursuing both differentiation as well as potential co-opetition. Competitors aren't always just the enemy. Microsoft and Apple are good examples of competitors that were essentially frenemies. Either way, respect is key in looking at and learning about your competition. Winning in competition comes from knowing and respecting your adversary. Thinking back to World War II when General Patton so intently studied and respected the German Field Marshal Rommel, and then went on to really score victories against Rommel in both North Africa as well as in the invasion of Europe. Michigan's Bo Schembechler, the coach of Michigan's football team, had coached under Woody Hayes at Ohio State before becoming his nemesis. And they went on to wage what was referred to as the 10-Year War, an obvious high degree of respect in the two camps for each other. Finally, learning about your organization means looking beyond yourself and your close-knit leadership team and exploring what your team looks and operates like. You're naturally exposed one way with the view of the boss. Nothing really operates the way it does when the boss is present. If, however, you really embrace all of your team members as equally important to the overall operation, especially after garnering their heartfelt feedback and input, it is possible that operations are conducted the same regardless your presence. So we've been loosely referring to organizational learning, so let's focus a little more there now. There's an old saying, a fish stinks from the head down. Organizations reflect their leadership. And by the way, authoritarian leadership, whether it's in government or business, is proven over time to be bad business, according to a group of researchers from cooperating universities in Australia. So be a leader and not a boss, and create leaders and not bosses. Make discovery as an organizational activity and see being a leader as a designer, a teacher, a steward of learning and learning resources, a type of servant leadership, if you will. General McChrystal had to make rapid changes, and a lot of rapid learning was required to ensure making the correct changes. He was willing to concede that all of their forces combined tactical and strategic excellence. Something wasn't working, and he had death as a scorecard. Many organizations feel their marketing and sales efforts are just fine. But do you know, without death as a scorecard, just how many battles you're losing? So creating organizational learning systems allows you to more quickly gain broad insights into your casualty count, if you will. You want to impart not just how, but why you do what you do across the departments in your organization. Get the team on board with the why along with the how from the get-go. The why frees your team up to better ponder better hows. Red teaming is another way to empower more and better hows by accounting for and embracing contrarian views. It's all about inviting a team of contrarians to essentially make fun of what everybody else says is the best way forward on any initiative. And then out comes challenges to ensure the best results. Peter Sang, widely considered the founding father of organizational learning, wrote The Fifth Discipline, the end practice of the learning organization. This book lays the groundwork of systems thinking upon which many modern management and leadership books have been written. Andy Grove, while leading Intel through one breakthrough after another, incorporated organizational learning into his management approach, anchored in OKRs, or objectives and key results. The main premise is that an objective and first its associated key results are evaluated as done or not done. That is all that matters, so that key learning can be attained to improve on the next results of an OKR iteration. John Doerr taught Grove's approach to Google founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin, who literally went wild with it. And then Doerr wrote Measure What Matters for the rest of us to go wild with it. So don't be afraid of creating breakthrough opportunities for your organization, but do so with goal setting that accounts for learning, and learning that creates new dreams, objectives, and goals. And on that note, whether it's OKRs, OGSM, objectives, goals, strategies, and measures, or the many myriad management styles, and management systems or frameworks you ascribe to, establish organizational learning systems as a key element and create room for innovation by embracing alternative thinking. It's done or it's not. It's achieved or it's not. Now, let's learn why. Simple is important. Vince Lombardi is rumored to have begun each preseason camp with the statement to his squads, "This is a football." The basics must have worked for him because he won several championships and Super Bowl winners raised the Lombardi Trophy. Anchor your learning in the basics and encourage your team to do likewise. Accountability really only works when your team is all very much on the same page. There's nothing like proven third-party authority to align vision and to provide clarity. So thank you so much for taking your time with this information today. If you are interested in continuous learning focused on business growth for your IT channel organization, sign up for our monthly mailing, which features, among other things, some great reading resources. I use Audible to listen over and over to books I find valuable to my business and personal life. I'm able to take advantage of exercise, dog walking, driving, and shopping times to get educated up. And I strongly encourage you to do likewise. Investing in becoming a learning leader for yourself and your organization will pay significant and long-term returns. Have an inquisitive and productive week, and we hope to hear from you soon.